right, it is 6 o'clock. I'm going to call this special meeting of the Board of Romeo Trustees to order. Would you all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Bartholomew?
Here.
Edwards? Fowler? Hart?
Here.
Poznanski? Here. Seidel?
Here.
Malzahn? Here. Okay, do we have a quorum? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At this time, approval of the agenda. Any additions, deletions?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
We have a motion by Hart, second by Bartholomew. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? At this time on our agenda, we have public forum. Anybody who wishes to address this board for any of the agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to new business. The first order of business, I have Stewart, Bouvet, and Whipple audit consultation approval. They put this in the packet. We've discovered that there are significant treasury items that have gone unaccounted for. Most of that was under the previous treasurer. Stuff that was either deposited and not put into the right account or transferred correctly. Renee is not able to do reconciliation on the bank accounts until all those items are found. And our current treasurer was having some difficulties locating them. So it was suggested that Stewart, Bouvet, and Whipple, our auditing firm, come in and assist with that process. I wanted to point out, I included a copy of his proposal, but I also included a copy of the vendor bill list. We bid this out several years ago, and our audit report, our audit is supposed to be about $27,000. Last year, you can see that it cost us a little bit more than that, and then we're at, for this current fiscal year, at $37,000. That's all the extra work that they had to come in and perform to make the balance, the books balance. So either way, we're going to have to make that expenditure if we wanted to wait until next fiscal year's audit report or just address it now. We'd like to get it addressed now so that we have a good, clean budget when we do our amendments for the last fiscal year to make sure that everything is in balance. So I'm looking for a motion to approve the $3,500 to $4,000. That's their fee. That's going to be for 3 days. That's tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. They've only approved them to come in tomorrow and Wednesday under my purchasing authority, but wanted to add it in case the third day was necessary. That puts it, the expenditure in your department.
And there's some significant amounts, right?
Well, one check was for $182,000. So
That's
yes,
significant.
yeah.
We're missing a check, we don't know where the money went?
Correct. Yes.
$182,000?
Yeah, it's quite scary when we're discovering all of these discrepancies and being able to go back and track it, whether it appears that the check was deposited into the proper bank, but not allocated to the right fund within our budget. That's what I'm being told from
Why
Renee.
wouldn't that be caught in the audit?
Because,
During it by the auditors?
because they did last fiscal year. So this
Oh,
is in
they
our
haven't
this is in our
audited.
current fiscal year.
Okay.
So when we get to that audit at the end of 2019, that's when
So
these
this
would
was
all
done
be found.
sometime after June, July last year.
That 182,000 was from October, I believe. I
So this
think
is-
she's still trying to reconcile the bank statements from last September, October, November.
So the extra 3,500 is to come in and get it fixed now versus fix it at the end where we might end up.
It has to be fixed.
Upside down or
Right. It has to
backwards.
be fixed one way or the other, because the audit, wouldn't balance.
But
And
if we
that's-
don't do it now, then we're managing with numbers that don't make any sense.
Right.
Exactly.
So we don't have a choice.
Right. Plus, if we wait, so the availability of the auditor was this week, so I'm glad that we had a special meeting that we could tack it on, or not till May. And then May brings up a whole nother scenario where it's tax bill time, and I know that Sherry will be very busy prepping and sending all those out. So this requires a lot of legwork. Just FYI, Catherine and I went through the budget to try and figure out where we would fund this from, because it's not an expenditure that it was budgeted. We're gonna suggest that we pull $3,500 is available in line item 802, which is an audit from, what revenue fund was that? I'm sorry. I didn't write down the number, what department that was from, but it was from another audit in a department that wasn't being used. I believe that was of the water fund. And then we have $1,910 from the treasurer's deputy. There was a part-time employee that was not being utilized. We have no employee in that position, so we were gonna pull that from the treasurer. And then there's another $500 for,
What would you
I think
say
that
the
was for
total was
computers.
for it? 37?
they're estimating between $3,500 and $4,000.
So you're at the 4,000 with the first two, right?
Yes, yeah.
4,900?
Yes,
Okay.
so even though it's not in the treasurer's budget, that's sort of where we're gonna have to make that adjustment. And in our April 15th meeting, if that expenditure, I don't know if that'll be billed in April or not, or if it would see you on council bills in May. But we'll have to just make that as a budget amendment, a transfer in and then an amendment going out. But it is in the budget, we found the money to cover it.
So we have that $180,000, whatever the number is, so we have the money, it's in the bank. It just didn't get plugged in.
Well, we don't know where it got plugged in.
I'm not 100% certain where that money is, because right now it can't be accounted for.
Was it a single check?
I can't account for that either. So
So how do we even know?
well, Renee in her spare time is still trying to, again, reconcile the checking accounts from last year, from 2018. And that was one of the ones that I said, well, what do you mean you're missing money? And she said, well, I just found this 182,000 that was in, but not transferred to the right department. So in that specific instance, for that one, it should be in, like we have the money, right? It just isn't accounted for. We have the $10,000 check from the Lions that was supposed to be appropriated for their bulletproof vests. And the expenditure was made, so some of the items from the police department are showing negative, but that check apparently never cleared the bank. So no one can find that check. So I know that's one that's missing.
On top of the other one?
Well, the other one,
There's
we don't know if it's
significant-
one check or multiple checks, it's
I
a
do
dollar
not.
value.
Right.
Okay.
Hence
Right.
the reason we need someone to audit this.
Very
Yes.
unfortunate.
Right, it's a forensic audit, and, right, and Stuart, Bavay and Whipple are auditors, so rather than trying to bring in some sort of account temp or somebody else
No.
to handle it, it just seems to make most sense that they would be the go-to person to try and clean up at least the tail end of 2018, and then help put a process in place for 2019 with the new treasurer in place, knowing how to properly, seek and find.
Figure out what's going on.
And then we also have the $10,000 that was the additional cost that we weren't budgeted for this year, for our 2018 or 17-18 budget. It was 37,000 instead of our 26,000. So our budget, we have $10,000 over budget there.
Right.
It's not missing, but it was
Right, it was over budgeted, yes.
by $10,000.
And that one I couldn't find, so I needed to go back and look at last fiscal year. The budget amendments that we made at the end of last fiscal year is where I think that was reconciled when we did those last minute transfers in. Because I don't show that the audit report this year is at the 37,000. So I'm assuming that it hit last fiscal year.
Okay.
But we're still trying to just establish a list of what needs to be amended for our third quarter, which you'll see that on your April 15th meeting. And then,
So for the current fiscal year, we're at 26,000 with Stewart and with Bouvet. Is that what that?
well, it's split up, the auditing amount, this 27,000 is split up between multiple funds, because they audit
Right.
all of
And-
these funds.
And
That's what we-
the DDA
The DDA
is part
is one of
that.
them, right.
But that's
Motor
what we've
pool fund,
allocated, so
cemetery
we
fund.
haven't overspent for the current year that we're operating in. The 37 was from the previous
Is- right.
year.
Okay.
As
So
far as
we
I'm
would be
aware.
at 30,000.
So it's not another
If we
10,000 we
include-
gotta find before June.
Correct, that's
Okay.
what we're hoping. I'm
Right.
hoping that
Right.
with the list that Renee has questions on,
Yeah.
they
But
can find them in 3 days.
the clarification I'm looking for is whatever we had them do in the prior fiscal year added up to around 37. So
Right.
right now, in this fiscal year, we're at 26 plus the 4.
Right. And
So
we're at a
we're
bit
at
of a
30.
disadvantage because none of us were here during this audit time. Jan, the old bookkeeper, was here, we had the old treasurer there, we had Mike there. So, I mean, we can see that the expenditure occurred, we can see the bill, but what
So
items they were actually searching for, I don't know. I don't have an
Are you confident
accounting.
3 days is enough to get this squared away?
According to Paul's letter, that he's hopeful in 3 days, but again, I don't know how much difficulty they'll have, and we won't know until she gets there. Hopefully,
Doesn't
she
sound
can
like-
give a list of directives between Renee and Sherry, and they can seek and find whatever, give
Well,
them some
doesn't-
direction on where to look for it.
It sounds like they only have that many days available right now, and if they needed more, they couldn't come back and do it till after the next
Until
meeting.
May, that's correct.
So they'll have some kind of an update for us and then we
Yes.
can decide further from there.
Yes,
I guess we don't have much choice.
Yeah.
I didn't think so either, but it's
I guess
unfortunate.
I'll make a motion to spend an additional funding to audit our current fiscal year books. I don't know if that's the right motion or the right wording,
At
No, that's fine.
3,500 to 4,000?
not to exceed 4,000.
I mean, they're good at what they do, so they might find it out.
Support that.
Yes. Okay, so we have a motion by Seidel, we have a second by Poznanski. You're gonna take a roll call on that for me?
Wait, hold on 1 second. Okay. Seidel,
Yes.
Poznanski,
Yes.
Bartholomew,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Malzahn.
Yes.
Okay, motion carried.
The second one that you have from Stuart Buffet and Whipple is for a SAW grant gap funding analysis. This is reimbursable under our SAW grant, so this shouldn't be an expenditure out of our budget, but out of that grant money that we qualified for. So it's part of the, separate from the sewer, wastewater, but still another part of the arm that's a requirement that we fill out all this list of bullet points that you see that's spelled out in this top letter of what they're going to take a peek at. 3 years of past historical expenses, review the year-to-date revenues and expenses, compare upon the budget, review the user's information and volume, a lot of historical data that they want to see. They're going to prepare an estimate of the 2019 revenues and expenditures if there is a gap in the funding. So a lot of it is just developing our asset management plan. That's what he's looking at right here.
Okay.
Now, is this an annual thing we already do, that we should be doing, that we will do?
No, this is all something new that the state of Michigan has implemented when they did the whole SAW grant study, when they wanted everybody to be accountable for their assets. So whether it's the sewer, whether it's the water, they've given out all this money and they said, okay, now we want to see these consumables. Are you actually taking care of what assets you have? And they need these studies done to make sure that we're doing that.
Is there a dollar amount that's with this? Or?
Yeah.
Yes, it's,
Oh, percent.
that's the 8 to 10,000.
Do we get the grant money after we spend it or prior to spending it?
I don't know, what do we have, what have we received so far in the revenue for the SAW grant? Do we have all the money in?
No, we do not.
Okay.
We get it about, sometimes it comes prior to a project, and then other times it comes after. The last one came after, the $55,000 came after the projects.
Okay. So I don't know what the revenue
It's-
schedule is.
Yeah,
Well, we might
it's
have
through
to
the
front it, but we
state.
would be reimbursed.
Right.
But there's 100% confidence we're reimbursed, so it's just a matter
Yeah, we
of,
I
have
can
to do
find
it.
out the schedule
so
from
we're
the state.
basically approving funding it ahead of reimbursement.
Yes.
Possibly.
Or, yeah. Well, the reimbursement
I'll make
is
a
in the
motion to spend
possibly.
the
No. Yeah.
8 to 10 grand to do the gap funding for the SAW grant.
What does SAW actually stand for?
Support.
Sewer and water.
Sewer.
Duh.
Okay, so we have a motion by Poznanski. We have a second by Bartholomew.
To approve them.
Also, will you call the roll? So, I'm sorry,
Can I make it not to exceed 10 grand?
I was just gonna ask you that.
Oh.
Okay, so not to exceed 10 grand.
All right, Poznanski,
Yes.
Bartholomew,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Seidel,
Yes.
Malzahn.
Yes,
All right, all yeas, motion carried.
thank you. All right, now onto the fun stuff. So obviously, Catherine and I met once with James Vitrino, our consultant. We included Renee, the auditor, and treasurer all in that meeting to try and just gain an overall perspective of how we're going to handle this budget. As long as I've been on this board, we've never had a meeting like this, a goals and objectives meeting. We also only looked at one current fiscal year. So we want to sort of change the mindset and say we're going to look at a 3 to 5 year projected fiscal. And as Catherine and I are working with the other department heads and the accountant, Renee, we wanted to get an idea of what do we want to do? What kind of projects do we want to fund? Because we don't want to try and put some line items in the budget and then get here and then there not be support for any of these projects. We don't have a lot of money. When I look at the current fiscal year, our revenues are at $2,825,000 and our expenditures are at $2,115,000. So we should have some budget carryover, so we should be able to accommodate a couple of projects that may need to be done. We also have the sale of the Clinton Street property. That would be an additional revenue stream when we close on that. Something to consider of what we would do with that money. Now, we can just dump it all into a rainy day fund if that's what you think we should do. We can dump it all into, to streets. I think that there are multiple projects, and you see on the list that I created in front of you and included in the packet, some projects that I think are long overdue. And I'm open to suggestions on other things that your constituents may have brought to you and said, hey, what about this? Like I just had a comment said, we need trees. I didn't even think about planting trees. So trees may be one that we decide to add tonight. Some of the projects that, I'll read them just for the camera. We have a police department compliance and maintenance issue. I'll talk a little more about that in a minute. Sidewalk improvement and maintenance. We've been talking about sidewalk improvements for quite some time. We still have the DDA consent judgment agreement in place, whether or not we want to fund the DDA back with that money. We can take a look at the LED light conversion. I think that was a project that the DDA looked at and said it was a lot of money and maybe pass that off to the village. I'd like to take a look at putting a columbarium up at the cemetery so that we can have as many burial plots or spaces for sale for our residents. Cemetery maintenance and improvements. Our cemetery is really in bad shape right now, so we need to take a look at funding that. Our master plan is totally out of date. We should be updating that every 5 years. Our last update was 2008, correct? Yes, and that's one that, if that had been in place and we had a current master plan, we could have probably taken advantage of the redevelopment district program that Megan brought forward, but it's a missing component and
No,
it's
actually,
kind of key.
it would help fund that. By entering into it, it would help us fund that.
And that's one
Fund
thing
that
that,
budget? I'm
yeah,
sorry.
that's also one of the things that the Macomb County Planning Commission, or the compliance assessment that they're gonna do, should help us qualify for that. We're still negotiating what the cost would be if they would do it for free, just assisting us, or if we would have to share in the cost of that. We've talked about moving our meeting room and getting chairs that aren't quite so uncomfortable for everybody, so that we would be able to have a projector or some sort of better microphone system so that people could hear. We talked about moving that over to the old WBRW building probably 3 or 4 years ago. I'd like to see the village park revamped with addition of maybe some playground equipment or a handicap swing. I have a donor who came to me and said that they would love to put a handicap swing in somewhere. There isn't one in the entire village. Thought that would be a project that would be kind of fun and utilized. Obviously, we have some streets that need resurfacing. There's a ton of grants out there. I get emails all the time, but there's no one really to write and coordinate that effort. So whether or not we would want to hire somebody to take on that task. Obviously, other considerations that I listed on below are the fire and ALS contract. We still are in negotiations with that, but it looks like it may be an additional. They're asking for 70,000 in our 2019-20 fiscal year. And then the OPEB trust fund, that's an additional 70,000 that we're gonna have to put in there for next fiscal year. And we're still working with our insurance carrier, Cornerstone, to see if there's gonna be an increase in our healthcare premiums this year. It looks as if we won't, but I still don't have, that's a renewal. So we're not sure exactly where it's gonna fall in, but just some big expenditures that we're taking a look at, as well as that matching funds grant for that Powell Road paving in 2022. So that's 261,000 that we'll have to budget for a couple years down the road. So, the police department. Our police department right now is out of compliance because we share that glass door. If anybody came in, FEMA, FBI, for whatever reason, I hope they never have to come into the village, but it would be significant fines and problems for the police department because we do not have a secured door. Right now we have one bathroom in the village hall and it's shared between the police department, the prisoners, and the office staff. So,
It's not good.
I
So
know.
is that the reason that's the first one on the list?
Well, it's in random order, but we've reached out to Ford. They have always given a $10,000 donation to the police department, not always, but the last several years. And Chief Dan used it last year to buy his bulletproof vest. So they give about $10,000. Him and I chatted this year, and he said that he would like to use that money to bring the department into compliance.
I think
So-
that'd be a good idea.
What we talked about, obviously space is an issue. If you walk out that door before you get to the bathroom, there's a room just off to the left, and that's the officers' lean room right now. So their computers are in there, and when the officers are writing up their reports or accessing information, that's the room that they sit in. So we'd actually like to utilize that room and create a second bathroom. That would allow us to then put a wall between that room and the current bathroom, and they would have their own secured door. So they would have that bathroom that's existing for the police department use, and we would be able to have our own bathroom for the village hall and employees use there. We would take the furnace room that's to the right, where obviously there's two furnaces, each department has our own. One of them is fairly new and can be turned and mounted on the ceiling. The other one is not, so we would have to replace that furnace, but both of them could be mounted on the ceiling, and then that would allow them to have a break room, or their officer room, or move that lean room over into that area. I don't know if anybody toured the police department where right now the officer's changing room is downstairs in the basement. Literally,
5 foot?
they can't even stand up in there. So they have to stand between the ceiling beams to change and get dressed for their shift. So part of that makes it a little more comfortable for our officers to be able to have that room upstairs by the bathroom. So that's just one of the projects.
If you run the risk of getting fined for not being in compliance, you need to be in compliance, so.
Well, not just that,
Agreed.
it's a safety thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying, you're out of compliance, because number one, it's not
Right.
safe, and two, so.
When you say putting a wall up, do you mean like eliminating that door altogether?
I think it would just be a secured, like, no glass door that would just remain locked.
Locked, okay.
Between.
Probably still have to be a
Right.
fire
Village
exit.
and the police.
Yes, because a lot of people can, just think they can walk right through because they can see through it.
Right.
They know people are down there, but we're not allowed to utilize that as access to the police department. I did had Jerry Long, Mighty Master Plumber, come out. He said he thought it would be about $4,000 to put the bathroom in. We would still have to get some engineering drawings, and I just reached out to Mark Berman and said, hey, if you get a second, come over and take a look at this so that the building department would be all on board with that. And it would be about $10,000 to move those two furnaces. So, in theory.
To move and purchase?
Yes, to move and purchase one new furnace and move the second one. There's also some other things that need to be done. The roof is leaking in the police department, that's a flat roof. I think Nathan was over there and sort of looked at maybe putting some sort of mesh. All of the windows on the west side of the building are all rotted. The door upstairs, literally right now, it has a hole in it. The door, the wood is rotted away, So we need to even secure that exterior door.
You mean the one where you can go up the stairs on
Yeah.
the
The
outside
fire.
of the building?
Yes.
Where does that, what
Yes.
does that lead to?
It's
The upstairs.
amenity
The
room
entire building,
upstairs.
right? You can access the entire building through that door.
Well,
So,
obviously, you're past 20 grand at this point with all this stuff.
well, no, 10 for the bath, 10 for the furnace, 4 for the bathroom. I don't know if the drawings would be less than 1,000, so that's at 15, and then I figured another 5 to take care of patching the roof and any other exterior maintenance.
But the
That's just a very
are
rough
we-
estimate.
If we're
but-
looking at new windows, if the windows are rotted, how big are the windows? Like that big?
Big. No, they're tall.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you're looking at
They're
a
not standard
couple
size.
grand, 3 grand a window?
I've never replaced windows, so I really don't know, but I'm happy, if somebody's thinking that that's a project that they want to investigate, and we could probably fit it in our budget, I'm happy to
Yeah.
focus on that and get some legitimate estimates and put something in writing, but,
I say that's probably I mean, other than the fact you have residents walking around with cans of orange spray paint to spray paint all the stupid sidewalks they trip over, that, the police department seems like we need to make your offices safe, we need to give them a place to change and have a restroom for their
Absolutely.
customers, and, right? I mean, you gotta do it right.
That's what they are ultimately.
right.
Could
Yeah,
we use
do it
the
right.
upstairs?
Right.
though?
But is,
Could you put the furnaces upstairs? Could you put the bathroom upstairs? Free up more space down there?
It's something that we looked at, but there's no plumbing right now upstairs, so that would cost more to run. Right now, because they're back to back, it would be pretty easy for Jerry to tie into the same sewer lines just going right down the floor, literally, they would be, the rooms are right next
Could
to
you
each
put the
other,
pipe
but.
up the wall?
But to
Better
have both
than having the
bathrooms
bathrooms
upstairs would be
upstairs, though.
good.
So you'd have to take
Keep them
Just the one.
downstairs.
patrons upstairs.
are they big, is the area big enough to be ADA? Because that's part of it too, you're gonna have to be ADA.
Right, it's the same size, we basically measured it off, it's the same size as the existing bathroom, those 2 rooms, so. But that'll be a judgment call that Rich Berman will have to make when he does the drawings,
Yeah.
so.
So that's, I mean, I guess for us to be able to get an accurate budget and make some recommendations, and then what we could have is different, if needed, phases. I mean, we could do that work, I think that has to be done. I mean, you do have to have the way the police separation for that is something we have to do. The windows could be maybe something, depending on what the cost is, we can do it. That door upstairs, I did see that, there's probably a way that we could even repair, because I think it's the bottom for now. There's probably a couple pieces of metal that we could
Yeah,
put
I
in
asked
there.
DPW to come and just at least
So-
secure it so that, right,
Yeah, so somebody
the
can't
air's
just
not whipping through
dig
there.
underneath it.
Seems like it should have a
But
secure metal door.
Until we know
there.
what the real, numbers are, but,
Mm-hmm.
So if you're at, I mean, I agree that that's one of the top priorities of
Mm-hmm.
things to investigate. That's what you're asking us, right? What are
Yeah,
the
I'm asking
things-
for your
Yes.
input on all these projects, like what would you consider a priority so that help us,
And are we still
craft the
waiting?
budget?
Are we still waiting for an answer from Ford, I'm sorry, on the 10K?
No, they're,
I believe that they have committed that.
Okay.
They said that they would be happy to fund that again. We don't have the check in yet, and we're still trying to find last year's check.
but they should cut us a new check, right? If the money was
Yes,
never
yes,
gone.
right. Sherry, the treasurer has reached out to the
Autumn.
treasurer of the Lions and asked if she could just please cut another check because it has not cleared
I'll
the
be there
account,
tonight, I
so.
can even ask Autumn if she follow up on that.
I don't know
I
if,
think she was on vacation, but
Oh, okay.
yeah, maybe if she's there, you can follow up, that'd be great.
I don't mean to jump the gun, but as far as you asked us to think of things that we need to do in that, the property on First Street, up by, where it turns to dirt, First Street goes, we have that property up there, I really think that we should consider moving forward with selling that property, so that we can not only get the revenue from that, but we can start getting taxes on that property, so long as there's proper easement and whatnot to put it out to bid for builders.
Right.
Remember some of that conversation, there's the problem with the road being the access road, that I think is part of the, we have the road, I think it's a private road, but we have right away to get to our well.
Okay,
And because that's a little bit problematic as far as actually making an entrance.
I mean, it's a
and getting
short distance, is the way I look at it, so whatever we would have to do to make it compliance as far as accessibility goes, I think that we should certainly
Right.
look
At least,
this.
if anything, then if the people in that area even want to buy it,
Do we know how much
if they
acreage
want
is
to
out
keep it as a
there?
park, let them,
No, we don't want
their
to do that.
association buy it. No, but I'm just saying,
Right.
they could buy the
Oh, if
property.
they wanted to buy it,
And they
yeah.
don't want to build anything on it, but instead of just having it, they don't want to
Just
build on
sitting
it,
there.
they don't want to own it, maybe the group can buy it, that's another option.
So-
I don't know how much, I think it's a
But we should
couple
do
of
something.
acres, but I don't know exactly what
Yeah.
what the area is. So we can take a look at that, pull out some documentation and get it for you guys if you want to talk about publicizing it, or putting it out for bid, just like we did with the Clinton Street property. Is that what you'd like
That's kind of what
to
I'm
say?
thinking, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if the next item that we had on there is the sidewalk, because we do need to do something with the sidewalks. And part of the conversation that I had in talking with Sterling Heights, we were talking about how they work with the grinding of the roots and working with the trees and that, and the guy goes, yeah, that's kind of each year they've had a different vendor that's been doing it. He said, the guys do it and then it's not quite what they had thought it was, and they don't bid again. So they do have kind of a turnover of the people that are doing it. I was hoping it was the same guys who were doing it, and maybe they'd have a capacity to be able to take care of us too, but that's not really the case. But with the trees, he said, and in all honesty, even though it's the contract, those guys, are putting in cement and they get rid of the roots that they need to get rid of to get their cement in there. And being the condition of Archie's, I did talk to John at Mount Vernon, and, some of our trees, that would be the last nail that would take the trees out. And in kind of discussing it with him, maybe do kind of an assessment of the specific one. So what I'm thinking an approach might be is the ones that are the real tripping hazards, like you're talking about, they've got the orange paint and that's where there's an older tree that has done the roots, and there's probably 2 or 3 streets that have more of those, is actually, and John was willing to do that, kind of take a look, because he said, you know what, in all reality, some of those trees are really close to coming out anyway. So if we're going to be taking those roots and things out, it might be a case where that tree just needs to go.
The one in
rather
front of
than
my house is see-through, and it's lifting the sidewalk up
Yeah.
4 inches.
So what I was thinking maybe an approach might be to kind of get our feet wet on this is tackle the real trip hazards, which are typically with these routes, identify each one of those, actually have John come out, take a look, and we do an assessment of how we feel for that tree. Take those, and I don't know if I haven't really talked to the DPW whether on that smaller scale we could, you're replacing a couple slabs in some of those cases. We can maybe do even part of the tear out, or whether we'd have somebody do it, but I still think we'd do them all at the same time, to keep the economy of scale and keep the cost down, but maybe address that. And then a second phase would be going through and just all the crack sidewalks and different things where we could have a contractor come in and it wouldn't be as fragile, if you will, because the other component, I don't know if you've talked to anybody from, HRC or something, but we would want to have somebody that is on behalf of the village to make sure that, the cement's the right consistency of the cement. That was some of the things I got from Jay Folds. He's even worked with HRC on some of those other ones, but you do have to have somebody that's even doing some spot checking, if they're doing a big work, to make sure the guys are pouring 4 inches of cement, what the cement is that they have, So that's another component that's in there. So that's kind of, we have the sidewalk committee hasn't really kind of, but that's kind of what I would come back to the committee, to say, to come to our board, that we would, first take care of the real bad, because there are ones, it's like a 4-inch thing that, it's
Right.
bad.
We had another trip and fall in downtown, so there's several areas in downtown that really do need to be addressed. Again, we put a cone and some orange spray paint out there to try and, red flag it. But again, I do think that our sidewalks are incredibly important, on the top of the list, because they haven't been addressed in such a long time.
And everybody
And whether
walks.
that's just, if we don't have the money for it, then we just start sending out the letters. We've established the addresses, and so if we just have to send out the letters, notifying the homeowners that they have to replace that sidewalk.
Well, the way our ordinance actually is, we're responsible, if they do it themselves, then we pay for just the cement. If they don't do it, then we do it and they pay for half of it.
So
So,
we pay for what our cost of the cement would be, not what they would go get it for.
right, so what's always happened, and I don't think it was right, it was a little secret that we've kept, that we told them that we'll pay for half of the cement and just put the onus on them that they need to get it fixed. We never really said, or we'll fix it. So how it works with our ordinance is we would, give them $20 for the cost of the cement that we pay for, or if it was a $200 job, they would pay $100 and we'd, do the job. So I think, if we're upfront about that and honest with what their rights are, I mean, if I had to have one done, I would rather have the village do it and pay half the cost than me pay for the whole cost except for the cost of the cement. We pay a very small portion, so, I
So
just.
right now, we don't have any numbers to sort of plug into a budget. That's sort of what we're up against. So whether or not the sidewalk subcommittee wants to meet and come back, or we say, look, budget in there $50,000 for this fiscal year, and we'll fix as many as we can for 50,000. I mean, I don't know, whatever the number's
If I
gonna be.
were
but-
taking the numbers that we had before with just our rough counts, and if we took the dollar amounts that Sterling Heights was doing, it was a couple $100,000, the village portion would be, I think, just in rough estimates, and then you could be off, and that was numbers that they had bid from, so who knows? Taking that as a thing, it was about 80,000. So I would think to do the sidewalks we were talking was probably about $100,000.
Okay.
But I'm thinking of taking a pared down one where it would take us going through and getting every address. I'd even say take a picture of what we've got. And if we've got 25 sets of trees that are doing that, we would take care of those 25. That's the big thing. And then go back to assess what's left of the sidewalk and then look at having a contractor come in and do all
Well,
of
your
that.
question tonight is do we think it's a priority, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And how
it's a
much money
priority.
would you want to
It
put,
is.
well, how much money would you want to put towards it?
We gotta get estimates, and then we gotta figure it out, but it's a priority, we
Well,
gotta
and
get
if
it
we're
done.
going on people's property and taking care of their trees, what
Well-
kind of liability does that put on us?
It's our
not-
trees.
The trees are usually
The trees that are in
inboard
the
of
easement are ours.
Yeah.
So
if
I
I
would.
We're
could-
talking about the ones on towards
There's
the
not too
street.
many that are
On the
other
property
side.
owner's
There's
side.
a couple, but not very many, most of them are.
And if I could just piggyback on what Bob was saying about the trees, in our business, when we seal coat driveways, they'll have a tree and it raises the asphalt, and I'll tell them, we can cut the root, and at least the root won't get any bigger, okay, because at that point, it actually starts to get a little bit smaller. But this is asphalt. And we've cut a lot of them, and I've never seen one tree die as a result of it, because some of these bigger trees have so many roots going everywhere. In fact, when my parents had their driveway asphalted, I watched them literally whack off a root like that on a walnut tree. This thing is still thriving today because of all the other roots that are. So I don't think that's going to be a big problem.
It's just
that we
some of
have
the
to-
ones that are on their last legs,
Yeah, and then a lot of them are so old that it's almost time to.
And you do that, you put the cement in, and then we end up taking the tree out, it's.
But if you compare the concern of the tree versus the trip hazard and possible lawsuits, etc.
So then
I
do
think
we
we
also
need to-
put money in for tree replacement? So it
Tree
seems to me
removal.
that the subcommittee's got to work with the tree board and try and figure out,
If our
if you're
ordinance
gonna
is
take
no
them out,
longer
you gotta
put
put them in.
trees-
I just don't think it's going
We
to be
don't
that big of a
allow
problem.
trees where we would be taking the
Them
trees
out.
out of right now.
Right.
I wouldn't be paying for trees to put on people's personal property.
Well, that's
No,
what makes the
we wouldn't do
village.
that.
You're not, you're putting it on the easement.
But we
And-
wouldn't. 'cause
Yeah, you will. That's what makes this village, is the tree line
the
streets.
tree line streets,
But
right?
that's, our ordinance says not to.
No, our ordinance is not to put trees in between
On
not for the
easement.
homeowner to put a tree
No,
out there.
that's not,
Yeah.
there's not in the ordinance that we can't put them in the easement.
They
It
can't,
would-
because technically we own it, right?
Right,
But
the
we
residents
can.
don't, but the village plants them, so I think the village should
And we
continue
have
to
to decide
replant
what
them.
we're gonna do for a plan. So I would think the tree board needs to meet. We have a full board now. And they need to meet and kind of come back with a plan, because part of it is, are we going to continue? I know the one thought is we don't want to plant trees in the easement because they cause problems with the sidewalks and the sewer, and, you know, we don't want to continue to do that. I know that was Marion's position, and other people think that's,
Here we are
it's,
paying money to chop them down now.
pardon?
Well, here we are talking about putting more money into it to take them down, and to fix the sidewalk. So why would we put more trees in the easements?
Because they're cool.
Well, and I'm saying, some people would say you don't ever want to put them in the easement. Other people say, hey, we should have been planting trees 20 years ago, because it's, on my street, we've lost a ton of trees.
Yeah.
We used to, and the trees are 120 years old. They're getting, a lot of them are at their end of their life cycle.
So,
And so are we going to replenish them because we like that? Or do we say, you're right, we don't want to do that? But
so to save
there's,
the time,
there's a decision to make there.
I mean, we got, I don't know if you're trying to get through it. Yeah, so
Yeah.
we need to look at the cost of the trees, the sidewalk, the whole deal, and then parcel it and figure out what we want to do.
But keep in mind, in between the sidewalk and the street, I brought this up some time ago, they actually have metal cylinders that they can put down
To keep the roots.
to keep the roots down. So
Right.
that's really not even,
There's different
A
things. So
problem.
The
I've
tree,
seen
the
the
tree
roots
board
actually
really
push
needs
those straight
to,
up.
the tree
Well,
board
if it's
needs
done
to
right.
seriously come with a plan. There's been nothing for 3-4 years with the tree board. The tree board needs to do
First
their.
of all, we would cover the things we have to cover, the extra for the fire, the extra for the OPEB. We would cover the streets, we would do the things we need to do first before we start going further.
But I'm projecting that it looks like we're gonna have, I think about a $300,000 budget under, so we'll have about $300,000 that we can roll over from this fiscal year to next fiscal year. And then we also have the sale of the Clinton Street property, so that's another $70,000. So that's what I'm sort of looking at, and that's just ballpark right now until we actually see how our fiscal year sort of ends up. But I'm looking at projects going, okay, what else would we prioritize then? If we had some fund balance to work with, what would those priorities be?
Well, and if we did actually enter the redevelopment ready certification, they would help they have trainers that would help us update the master plan, and if they couldn't help us do it themselves in-house for free, then they will price match half of this for us.
So I think you
But we
get,
need to be enrolled in it. We don't need to do this before we get into the program. The whole point of the 3 years, they give you 3 years to do this stuff, and they help you do it, or they help you price match it.
so I think you got 3 components to this, right? You got stuff that's absolutely mandatory you have to do. And then the second component is something that would be possibly grant supported or funded. And a third is a nice thing, right?
Right.
It'd be a nice thing to do,
Right.
to have a
Tim has
meeting
come to
room
me
with
with the-
comfortable chairs. That's a nice thing. Mandatory sidewalks, mandatory is the police department, optional are the grant fund. So you got 3 components. Break it down to the 3, find out what funding is left, work your way through mandatory, and then see where optional
And then work
takes
these into the
us.
5-year
And-
plan.
and
You
let
would
the
say
board-
that the chairs come in 5 years.
Have the
well,
cem-
wait a minute though.
have the
I don't
cemetery-
think the chairs are gonna be that much of an expense.
But again, you're gonna figure
I
out.
understand what you're
Right.
saying,
There's
but
more
these
than
are our
chairs,
taxpayers
though.
here.
We're talking about the meeting room and everything too.
Yeah, so maybe that moves
Down the
up.
road.
That,
Right.
we might
But-
decide that's mandatory, because I think everyone should see what we're talking about. Not us just
I
looking at
agree.
8.5 by 11 that happen to get really
And
wet.
for like the cemetery board, they should meet and they decide whether they want to do columbarium.
Well, but we have to fund the cemetery, because there hasn't been money
That
put into the
needs-
cemetery. They only put 20,000 every year,
Right.
and that's pretty much what it costs to
So the board,
maintain
the
it.
cemetery board needs to meet, and then they need to come back and say, if you guys can give us some funding, these are the things we can do. These are the priorities we see.
But would you think that would be a legitimate expense in our fiscal year for next year to do that? That's what I'm asking.
Yes.
Okay, so if I have them do that exercise, I don't want them to then be like,
But they
no.
have to come back and make a case for it, that that's the way it should be, you know.
As long as you're willing to at least listen to that case and support it. If you think that's not a priority, then I won't let them waste their time,
Right.
and we'll look at another alternative.
I still think that they should have a plan, you know, the
But they
the
have
board
anything
should
on
be
this
together.
list
If it doesn't happen
isn't
this year,
working.
we should have.
But I don't think it can get it needs to get worked in that 5-year plan,
But I don't-
possibly even
Yeah.
longer.
Right, so just, we're just
Because
asking to
these
help you
numbers at the bottom,
prioritize.
the fire
Absolutely,
is
in the
gonna
next
keep
several
going up
years
too.
it would
Yep.
be.
But
So
you don't wanna send
get the
them
board
out,
in.
you
Is
don't
there-
want them sending out, getting quotes and all kinds
No.
of stuff if you don't agree that it's even worthwhile, and that's what your point is, right?
That's my
Yes,
point.
it's worthwhile, go take
But
the
it
time.
may
get
not be
some
this
quotes.
year.
Well, but if they get it done.
And what about the
estimate-
possibility of the tower with AT&T? I mean, that's a lot of cash. that we
Another
could
revenue
use to
stream. For
Take care of the
maintenance.
cemetery, we could,
Right.
Well, what about that extra lot? Don't we have like an extra acre that we still haven't developed back there?
the cemetery?
Did they buy a
We have one
property?
small parcel, I don't know if it's an acre or not, but that's all that's left. And so my thought, in putting the columbarium up there at 25,000, you can stack, multiple urns, that's, you could, you figure a plot, how many are you gonna get even in 1 acre, right? Versus putting $25,000 into a building that you might be able to, to memorialize, what, a couple
And then
hundred,
what
a
the
couple
revenue
hundred
is.
people, right,
And then whatever the revenue is from that,
right.
if it makes sense.
Well, but I don't know how that works though, but if we put the money in, does the cemetery only go to village people anyways?
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah, you have to be a village resident to purchase a plot or a vault, right now.
I don't
And
know.
actually, the cremation is
It's going
the
up.
trend.
It's the more popular thing that's happening, right?
I'd-
So how
I'd be
about,
a part of that.
I wanna be, look at the time because the DDA
Right.
meeting's starting in 15 minutes. So just help me quickly, what do you think about switching over to the LED lights in downtown? We get so many calls that the street lamps are out, the street lamps are out, they get knocked down. Looking at this project actually transfers ownership of those lights to DTE. It becomes their problem. They have to
I think
maintain
that's a
them.
good idea.
And does that
Especially
save us
from a
money?
DDA perspective, I'm only on board if we can still put flowers and banners and do all the
Right. We
decorations.
still-
Yeah, we
can-
can order those
Do you,
specific kind
I
of poles.
don't remember how much that project actually cost.
I don't
Do you
know if we
remember
ever
what numbers
heard
you
a
were
real
looking at?
number.
Ask Lisa. Do you remember, Lisa? About 250,000. Yeah, and then that's a basic pole, and then we were looking at making it more of a decorative pole to match the town, and so did that include that?
That was a high-end pole, I think.
Okay, because we want it to not just be some basic pole, we want them to still look authentic to the town.
Okay.
But that also had a return on investment, right? It was a $250,000 purchase price, but then its cost to manage it and run the lights was 10% of what our
And
current
it's
cost.
actually a cement pole?
Yeah, well, but I'm just saying, that it's a $250,000 outlay with immediate return on investment as soon
Yes.
as you turn them on.
Yeah.
Your cost of operation is much lower, so you're reaping your payment back pretty
Right.
quick. I don't have the math in front of me, but I know
Yeah,
that
we
was
never- I
the,
don't think we
that was the
ever
whole
did.
push for it, right?
Make
So
a
would
case
you
for
think
it.
that that would be high on the priority list, or would that be
Yes.
something we would look at 2 years?
That's one that's easily calculated out.
Yes.
Go to DTE, find out what the calculations are, we can determine how many year payback it is, and then you will be able to
See the ROI on it?
propose that and be done.
Definitely high.
I think all of
Questioning
these
what
are
we can
within
do
that
within a year, because
3 to 5 years for sure, so getting information, I think, all of these are worthy.
If you're
But-
saying we were gonna have an extra, maybe 3, just the 2, the fire and the OPEB at the bottom are 140, we're already at like half. Is that spending, what does that leave us? Is that really only 150 left? Should we be spending everything, or are you just talking that's extra for projects?
Well, right now we have a $1.4 million fund balance. We have a nice, healthy fund balance. So that's not touching any of that. What
This
that's
is
saying
set- this
is,
is
we've,
set aside.
right, we have saved money on this year's budget, so I feel like it's okay to roll that into next year's budget to spend a little bit more on these projects, if we've saved money from this fiscal year to next fiscal year.
Unless we don't find the money we talked about at the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, now, one of the,
Could be a concern, but.
this is further down here, but the roads, we really have to get an action plan together on that. And I don't know if, just in the last year, how much more that they've deteriorated. And we've known we had to do this for a long time. And I'm wondering whether there's even, whether we do the tar in some of the cracks and things, to help give them 3 more years, so we don't have to replace everything at
Well,
one
I'm
time.
very curious to take inventory how the new hot box is working.
Yes.
As far as making the repairs. I'm hearing good feedback in Village Hall that seems to be working, but the potholes are cropping up faster than
But
what.
that's just doing potholes,
They
right?
can-
Well,
they can
actually,
come and fix.
the hot box can
Right.
do like full squares.
Right.
So as, what I'm seeing in the village is there's a lot of areas that are like a bunch of potholes. We don't have to do individual potholes with the hot box. We can go through and do a whole square. We can do a lot with that.
Right, we need a plan.
Right, but that would buy us some time as far as some of the worst areas, because those things are
And
pretty
then with
amazing.
the OPEB, why have, in the budget, I didn't see that we've transferred all the money from the brownfield. Are we doing that? Why is it not transferred yet? What's?
Right now, the corrective action plan that we approved did not utilize that brownfield money. It's still there we can put it in the OPEB, but the plan that we developed, the way we were gonna fund it this year, next year with the 110,000 then falling off from Ford, that we didn't need that money.
I thought I thought there was a decision made back in the fall that we,
That was the one, the
Made a
plan
motion
that
to
was
do that.
rejected.
no, not the plan, but we made a motion to put this money, the brownfield money into that fund.
Right, it was with that corrective action plan, and then that corrective action plan was not approved by the state. So then we made a different corrective action plan, and that was the one that
That's
we
the-
voted
that
on.
James brought in.
Right, in January. So that preserved that, it preserved that money in that fund. So we still could utilize that to fund our OPEB liability.
So those are things we just need to understand whether we're working with
But we haven't
200,000 or
heard back from the state if
500,000.
that plan has been
Correct.
accepted yet.
Yeah.
So we don't even know if that plan's been accepted.
Right.
But
So-
I'm not talking about the plan, I'm talking separate. I thought we made a separate motion to put that money, yes, we're doing that, put that money in that fund.
But then it got denied,
Correct.
and then it
No,
got
I'm
resubmitted.
not talking about the plan. I'm saying someone said, I make a motion that we're gonna put this money into that account.
But then the state said we couldn't do it that way.
No, they
Right.
didn't,
They
they don't
don't
have
know.
anything to do
They
with
didn't
it.
say we
The
couldn't do
OPEB
it.
trust fund that money was supposed to go into has not been established yet. Sherry and I met with the MERS representative on the investment side. We had to pass that resolution, which we did at last month's meeting, that basically said, we can invest the $350,000 and put it into this fund. That fund, like a lot of other funds, once the money goes in there, we can never get it back.
Correct.
So it was suggested, when we developed the corrective action plan, the second submission, that we maintain that as a possibility to fund it if we had an economic hardship. If we had something happen in the village, we had, whatever, that we would have, again, that rainy day fund that we could draw from.
I
So,
think,
I'll have
Megan,
to
what
go
the
back and look
motions
into it.
were, I think the motions actually were the plan. We voted to submit the first plan to the state,
See,
the way
that's-
that it was
that's
put
not- I'm
in.
recalling something separate, so I'll have to go look, and if I
And then when
find
James
it,
brought
I'll-
the second plan, that's what we voted to send to the state now. So if that comes back, then we have that as an option. That's what I recall anyway.
but that's why the transfer hasn't taken place, because one, we had to put all those steps in place to actually be able to move that money into it. All right, so I guess marching orders, we're definitely gonna take a look at the police department, securing the village hall, and getting those compliant, things that brought into compliance. Then we're gonna look at sidewalks as our number 2 priority. Is that what I'm gathering? And then the rest of the stuff, it's all good, and if we can fit it in, fine. If we can present it in a 1 or 2, 3 year span,
The stuff at the top, sure, but the OPEB and the fire at the bottom, no, those have to.
absolutely, they have to come in there. Right, I just wanted you, I put them there because I wanted you to know that I'm mindful that those are
Okay.
additional expenses that we're going to have to pay or account for in our budget.
And I'd like to see DTE to come back with us with the full-on cost
And the
of this
LED,
thing
right.
and what the return
Okay.
is on.
That information.
Because that's not gonna cost us anything to have them come back with a proposal.
And I would just like to say for the record, I appreciate you calling the special meeting because this is all stuff that needs to be talked about. And this is a good productive meeting to actually get,
Yeah, what do
Going
we
on
wanna
this
do?
stuff.
What do you want,
But at the
right?
same time, where are we with our meetings? Because we've only approved 16, and is this a second or a third special, which only leaves us 1 or 2?
We can have as many
we can
special
have
meetings as you
many
need, you
as we
still get
want.
paid for it.
just don't get paid for them. Was it 6 that we get paid for? or
Yes,
something?
I
I'm stuck here at 7 anyhow.
All right, right, exactly. So just a few minutes before that.
We can have a special meeting every month.
Okay, right.
We just don't get paid for it.
All right, so I think we have our marching orders. Last up on the agenda is public
Okay.
comments. Is there anybody who wanted to address this board under public forum? If not, I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting at 6:55.
Okay, support?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, any opposed?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody.